Hey there. On today's episode, we have an interview with comic book illustrator JK Woodward, the visual stylist behind comic books like X-Men's Origins Beast, an incredibly impressive run with IDW's Star Trek comics, Fallen Angel, plus a myriad of crossovers that include Star Trek The Next Generation with Doctor Who, the TOS crew with DC's Legion of Superheroes, and so much more. We'll discuss his origin story, how he approaches the creation of some of his characters, and his impressive retelling of Harlan Ellison's classic, City on the Edge of Forever, which is still one of my favorite Trek episodes ever. We'll do a quick check-in with a few cosplayers we met during BayCon, cover a film or two that you might have missed, all that and more on this episode of Wocket Launch. So let's start the show. Welcome to this episode of Wocket Launch. I am your host, Sinohui Hinojosa. Thanks for joining us. As this is a brand new podcast, it's customary to ask each of you to subscribe and like, perhaps send over a few comments, and let's begin a few conversations about our favorite science fiction and fantasy books, films, and television shows. And if there's something specifically you want me to cover, just let me know. But now it's time for my 5 favorite things. Each episode, I want to take a moment to cover 5 of my favorite things. Now, this list will be fleeting and momentary, and about 6 hours after I post this, there will be 5 new favorite things to be excited about. But for now, here are my 5 favorite things for this episode. Number 5, Doctor Who, specifically Ncuti Gatwa's run on the show and the brilliant return of RTD. I get it, it's not the same old Doctor, but to be frank, it never was. We have witnessed the sacrifice of the star whales, seen civilizations end, the grand heroics of a tin dog, the trial of a Time Lord, 3 doctors, 5 doctors, the war doctor, the fugitive doctor, and of course there's the caretaker. Who knows? But the Doctor is one constant, if they're anything. The Doctors change. Each and every regeneration or bi-generation grants us insight into something and someone brand new. So today, I celebrate the Doctor, who he is now, and who they might be tomorrow. The season finale of the most recent episode of Doctor Who is now available on BBC's iPlayer and worldwide on Disney+. On to number 4. They have finally released the trailer for Nautilus. Adapted from the Jules Verne classic 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, it follows the story of a renegade mariner, Nemo, as he and his crew set out for revenge, Viking treasure, and new adventures. This 10-part British reimagining was originally announced as a Disney Plus show, but after filming was complete, they decided not to move forward with it. It was acquired by Amazon Prime for release in the UK and in Ireland, and now US audiences will have a chance to see it on AMC, premiering this June 29th. I can't wait. Now, on to number 3. I admit that this is really not a sci-fi fantasy thing. No. Nonetheless, it's very cool, and some of you might even agree. The original cast of Hamilton will reunite on the Tony Awards in celebration of Hamilton's 10th anniversary. This includes the majority of the cast, including Lin-Manuel Miranda, Leslie Odoms Jr., Philippa Sue, Daveed Diggs, Renee Elise Goldsberry, Jonathan Groff, even Ariana DeBois. They are slated to perform a few songs from the show on June 8th. You can catch it on CBS television and streaming on Paramount+. On to number 4. Netflix recently announced the cancellation of Star Trek Prodigy, possibly the best Trek show you've never seen, and it's going to be taken off of Netflix very soon. No question, it never really got a chance on Paramount+, but with 2 seasons and 40 outstanding episodes, it tells a brilliant story about 5 young slaves escaping in a stolen experimental ship, a Captain Janeway hologram, and in Season 2, Trek's answer to Doctor Who. Please check it out while you can, or pick it up on Blu-ray today, but Star Trek Prodigy is definitely worth it. Now, on to my top favorite thing, and in the number 1 spot. My favorite thing for this episode is Superman. And I have a long history of reading and watching Superman, whether drawn by Kurt Swan, a Fleischer theatrical animated short, Kirk Alyn, or George Reeves' entries. I loved it all. but never delivered on its audacious promise until 1978, when it revealed the infant son of Krypton, who was sent to Earth to become a beacon of hope for all mankind. It was John Williams' incredible score, the deft direction of Richard Donner, and of course the inspired casting of Christopher Reeve that took over the audiences of the day with Superman the movie and its immediate sequel, Superman 2. Newer films and animated shows have continued his journey, with some better than others. The recent animated series My Adventures with Superman that was released in 2023 definitely stands out among the best. Be sure to check it out on Max when you get a chance. And of course, the Arrowverse version did a commendable job expanding his mythology. But when the Snyderverse version of the Kryptonian graced the silver screen, it felt different. The darker tones never seemed to match with the sense of who Kal-El really was, or who he was meant to be. There are so many out there that believe that this was the definitive version of our caped hero. But so many changes to canon, his code of killing, letting his father die to save his secret identity, and more, it just never really felt right. Enter James Gunn and his new film. The initial teasers left me hopeful. The style, tone, and overall look broke through its grim predecessor and offered something that was missing. The newest trailer returned me to a moment all those years gone by, when I first believed a man could fly. Watching it across the big screen during my Mission Impossible screening left me visibly shaken. And then I saw this short clip, which was recently posted. It features a few behind-the-scenes moments with David Gordon Sweat in action, casually chatting with children before a scene. But it wasn't his superhero attitude, his stance, or his powers that stood out. It was a feeling, a sense that Superman is now in good hands, that he once more represents something missing in our collective psyche, something we maybe didn't even realize was gone. He embodied hope. Hope for today, hope that we can all become better, and that we can be there for each other. That is what Superman is all about. But you don't have to take my word for it. Take a look for yourself.
Yeah, good. Okay, good. Good work.
How is Superman to work with?
He's fun.
Nice work, everybody. High fives. Boom. Boom. I did meet Kolchak, so those plays. Well, you're doing great work today. Oh, it looks like they might be ready. Are you guys ready?
One step back.
Let's roll, please. Ready and action!
Told you. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. For over 40 years, BayCon has brought fans together for epic panels, amazing guests, workshops, gaming, and unforgettable fun. This year, we enter a convenient parallel dimension, a spookier side of speculative fiction that you can experience this 4th of July weekend at the Santa Clara Marriott. BayCon, the Bay Area's longest-running, fan-run science fiction and fantasy convention. There's a place for you here. Visit baycon.org for tickets and more. And now, our Wocket Launch interview with JK Woodward. Let's start with the basic stuff. Where'd you grow up?
I was born in a small town in Massachusetts called Attleboro, and I think it was in '89 I moved to Los Angeles. I spent most of my time on the West Coast, but I'm now back in New England just recently. During COVID, I came back. But in the meantime, I traveled all over. Every couple of years, I would move. I spent some time in Frankfurt, Germany. I spent some time in London. And I spent a few years in New York as well, before ending up in Long Beach and then ending up back here. So I bounce around a lot. It's one of the perks of the job. When, like I said, it's you work out of your own studio, and that could be anywhere. So
Right.
I take good advantage of that.
What were some of your favorite places of living?
That's tough to say. I really enjoyed New York, though it was expensive. Even coming from LA, New York was expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of my favorite trips, and it was short-lived, I was only there a couple of years, was Frankfurt, Germany. Only because there is an art culture there similar to what a music culture in America. They talk about their favorite artists as much as they talk about their favorite band, and that's something that I missed when I came back to the States, because it's not quite the same. It is in comics in that kind of subculture, right, but in general, not the same. And I really enjoyed that, and it wasn't something I expected.
Was art And was this all something that came early on, or was this something that came to you later in life?
No, it was there from the beginning. I was drawing when I was a kid. I'm one of the few people that can say I'm doing exactly what I planned on doing when I was 7.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody can say that. Very few people can say
Yeah,
that.
there'd be a lot more ballerinas and firemen out there. You know?
A lot of
astronauts. But for me, yeah, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and surprisingly, I actually made that happen.
Yeah, I'm struggling to a science officer on the Enterprise. That's not going to happen. I'm waiting, so we'll see what happens there. What did you initially gravitate towards? What kind of things did you like the best?
I think at heart, I'm a surrealist. Like I said, I always wanted to be a comic book artist, and that was part of the appeal. I was also very much into science fiction art. I was like Boris Vallejo and artists like that, big Juiceco fan. I think that's what got me into painting. And before I got into comics relatively late in life, a lot of people do it right out of college or right out of high school. I was 30, I think, or 31 before my first comic got published. So before that, I was doing a lot of oil paintings, surrealist stuff. And when I was living in Los Angeles, I was actually hanging in a few galleries in the NoHo district in North Hollywood. That's what got me to Germany, actually. A record producer saw that work, wanted a painting for a cover, and wanted me to do some more work. And I was doing that from Los Angeles for a while, but eventually that got me to Frankfurt. And while I was there, it was a theme album. And basically we put together a book that went with the record that was saddle stitched. It was basically a comic book, as surreal as it was. And that's what eventually got me back into comic books. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take another crack at this. The work I like to do is definitely surrealism. It has to be a little bit strange. I've never been a still life kind of guy or a landscape painter or anything like that.
What kind of things did you consume? What kind of movies did you like? What kind of TV did you watch?
I was a big sci-fi and horror fan, which led me to artists like H.R. Giger. When I saw Alien, I was amazed by that stuff. And I eventually got to meet the guy while I was in Europe, which was incredible.
Wow.
I think of directors like Cronenberg, the body horror type of stuff. It really spoke to me. And you'll actually see that in some of my new stuff I'm doing. I think what kind of changed me, the first movie I saw that kind of changed me, and I might have been somewhere between 10 and 12, probably too young to see the movie, but John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd go there, because that is really what the seminal film that kind of created this whole. I think we all looked at this film and said, I didn't think this was possible. And some of the visual elements of it, especially because it was like there was the combination of it being real, and there's something real tactile to it.
Yeah,
that it's unique.
Yeah, and it blended a lot of body horror, a lot of images. Thinking of the head being the skin melting like a pizza, and the head stretching off and sprouting spider legs and things of that nature. Those poor dogs. There was a lot of great imagery in there that kind of inspired me.
It's really funny because one of my favorite films of all times is the original Thing from Another World, and all based on a book and same story essentially. And in the original book, it was much more of that ability to transform and change and whatnot. What other artists affected you?
I think the first artist I was introduced to that impressed me, and this is going to sound weird after all that surrealism talk, was Rembrandt. And that was a lighting thing he did. He wasn't afraid of shadow. To the point where sometimes you would only see the highlights of something. And so I was looking at that going, it's what you don't see. It's like jazz, the notes you don't hear, the notes you don't play. And I wanted to emulate that even in my comic thing. And then you see later, or like much later, Frank Miller would be playing with that. And I was like, oh, you can do this in comics. I wish I had done this a long time ago when I was influenced by that. But then it led further into more modern surrealists, more sci-fi art, H.R. Giger, as I mentioned. I loved the painters in comics. I loved Heavy Metal Magazine. I remember they had the Hulk magazine back in the late 70s, early 80s, where you'd have those beautiful Barb Larkin covers that would just make me go crazy. Because he always does those great highlights on things. You'd always have that sort of yellow rim light behind everything that made it pop. That really influenced me, and you'll see that a lot in my work too. And eventually led to Sienkiewicz. I picked up Moon Knight when he was doing that, when everybody was saying he was just Neil Adams on acid. But then he put out a book called Straight Toasters, and nobody knew what to make of it. It was pretty bizarre stuff. But I was impressed with the multimedia aspect of it. There was nothing he wouldn't use. It was a little bit airbrush. I think there was a little photography scratch. There was some pencil stuff. There was some ink stuff. It just, whatever he needed to get the mood he wanted in that panel, he wasn't afraid to switch it up. And you can do that.
Learning that there's more to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, do you have a favorite medium that you work in?
Generally, it's gouache for the painted stuff. Sometimes I'll throw a little ink and acrylic in there, but generally especially with the photoreal painted stuff, if you look at my Star Trek work like City and the Edge of Forever, that's much more of a sort of Alex Ross kind of style. It's very consistent, very photorealistic. The work I'm doing now that I'm transitioning from the Star Trek work into horror I'm doing a lot. I'm having a lot more fun. I'm playing with a lot more. So I'm using pencil. I'm using ink. I'm taking a lesson from Straight Toasters and just whatever that panel needs to get the mood across. So I'm not afraid to have the reader turn the page and go, what happened?
Well, there's a freedom there that you can kind of do whatever you want. Now, with the horror stuff, you said you were doing Star Trek, you're doing different things, but why is the horror finally something that you're getting into that just more now? Is it like, were you like waiting to do this, or did you need more time doing other stuff? Or
I think so. I got to say, with Star Trek, what I enjoyed doing the most is whenever there was an alien species in the book that hasn't been created, hasn't been seen on TV before.
Right.
I had a lot of fun with that, and they were always monstrous in some way. So I think I've been leaning in that direction for a long time and trying to find any excuse to do it. And I've been in Star Trek for almost like 20 years. So I think after a while, I was like, life is short. Let me try this. Let me see what I can do. And then some opportunities came across my desk and I took them. The first one being Kolchak, which was a lot of fun. And in that book, I worked with Peter David on a book called Fallen Angel, which was definitely a very moody book. I wouldn't call it horror exactly, but it was definitely dark. And so I enjoyed working with him on that. And when the Kolchak thing came up, guess who's writing the script? And it was an anthology. There was a 12-page chapter that I got to work with him again. Wow. So that was a lot of fun. But to answer your question, I think there's always been a horror element. There's always been that influence. There's always been a darkness to it. Even if you look at the work I did in Star Trek, if you look at City and the Edge of Forever, Harlan doesn't shy away from the dark stuff either. And part of the reason that script went through some changes that he wasn't pleased with. But there was a scene in there where the villain Beckwith gets punished at the end. And a lot of times I'll be told to tone it down when I do some stuff in Star Trek that gets a little too dark. But this time I got to do it and I had a great time. And I think that was the catalyst that said, you need to do more of this. And that led me in that direction. Yeah.
That's really interesting because I do think that we have certain properties, that certain IPs that have that universal appeal. There's almost an expectation of what that's going to be, Star Trek being one of them. Yep. To be able to like delve a little bit into that, but doing the monsters and doing the other things that, especially when you're creating something from the ether, from scratch, it has to be so much fun to be able to do that. Now, let me ask you about that. When you're reading and you know what it's supposed to, you have a basic description down. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you're creating a character, a creature, or a monster? Like, how do you what's that thought process about, I got to make this work?
All right, let's start with, an alien species, creating an alien species. I will establish a sort of headcanon, even if it's not in the script. Who are these creatures? For instance, I did a Star Trek Doctor Who crossover. We met these alien species called the Dai, who are amphibious. So I came up with everything from how they live in the water, where they sleep, where they go, because they just showed them coming out of the water, mating rituals. I did a salmon thing. None of this was used, but I have to know what these creatures are and how they live and why they're different. So that, and that sort of informs what I do in the panels. So in other words, if Riker's saying something to them, that might be shocking to them because of the headcanon only I know. But it does give me something to do, like to get a reaction from the character.
Okay, that's really interesting because I love the idea that you have to build a world, you have to make it live, and they have to exist in that environment, so you can pull out whatever you need.
And if not, it's there. So if the Dai come up again, I'm not the writer, but I can present this. So like, this was my thought about them. But yeah, it's good to have. It's good. It makes them more real. and so that you do more with them. I think drawing comics is like directing a movie or television. You don't write the script, but you write in between the lines. And the more that you have, the more that you understand, the more real it can be, the more real it can feel, the more real it will hopefully become to the reader.
Now, have you had a project that stands out for you that you always think about how much you enjoyed working on it or creating new characters for in particular, or is it just new every time?
No, it's definitely new every time. But if I had to pick something that you described, I would say I did a mirror universe of the Next Generation, and it was called Mirror Broken. And I got to reinvent these characters as they would appear in the mirror universe, a more militant version. And it's fun to play with that because, again, I developed that headcanon. To me, Picard is still Picard, but in this world, he's a tactician, but his tactician is military as opposed to scientific. I think that was a lot of fun because I, again, got in my head developed backstories for all the characters, why Data had Borg parts he was incorporating into it. He figured out a way to communicate his positronic brain to control these parts. Why is he doing that? He's the same Data. He wants to be human. But in the mirror universe, being a better human means being a better weapon. And so he, in his quest to become human, he becomes a little more monstrous. And with that in mind, it helps me design what he's going to look like.
So when you're doing that and you're building characters and you're creating from scratch, I'm just curious because I know how I work when I write and do different things. Mm-hmm. Do you listen to music or do you have music in your head?
Yeah, a lot of times. When I'm in the more creative process, yes. It's inspiring. And it's when I get to the more tedious parts, because it does get tedious. Once you do the layout of the page, once you have developed your characters, it just becomes a matter of getting the detail. And that a page can take like 20 to 40 hours sometimes for a painted page. So it does become a lot of tedium. And I just distract my mind with podcasts usually.
That makes sense. You always listen to what other people are chatting about.
Yeah, and it's also company. You're not in a studio by yourself,
That's the other part of this. There's such an isolated element of this. So you work on your own, now you're sending things out. Like you mentioned before about going to con, it's kind of nice to see friends and people that you've worked with, collaborators, all that. Is there a better way to do it? Or does it have to be a solitary work?
Oh, no, it doesn't. I know a lot of people that rent studio space and there'll be 3 or 4 artists and they'll go into work every day, live in the same city. I myself would get too distracted. For some reason, I don't do painting or drawing while talking. The mouth starts moving and the hands stop and vice versa. Right. So it's solitary is better for me only because it's faster.
Gotcha. When you're working on the project and you said you spend so much time on maybe a single page, what is the longest project that you worked on? I'm just kind of curious about that amount of time it takes to do some of this stuff.
Fully painted takes a long time. And I would guess the Star Trek Doctor Who was an 8-issue miniseries. So I think I was on that for over a year. That was probably the longest project. I worked with Peter David on Fallen Angel for 3 years, and that came out monthly. So I wasn't doing the painted stuff. I was doing traditional inks and digital colors. So I would say probably not counting that, I would say the Star Trek Doctor Who crossover. And that was an interesting one because what happened is the lead time kept getting smaller and smaller as it went on. I don't know if it was because I was falling behind. I think it was because they were putting them out earlier. If you get too much of a lead time, sometimes they get them out. It was a very good selling Star Trek book, so they might have been in a rush to get them out there. So I had to get creative and reuse some backgrounds on things and slap it together in Photoshop and then just paint faces over it and things of that nature. And that one actually ended. Yeah. Secret. That one actually ended in an interesting way because I was in New York at the time and I had been planning to move back to the West Coast. So we had sold a condo. My ex-wife had sold a condo at the time, moved to Long Beach in Long Island, not the Long Beach, California that I would eventually live. Right. And we happened to be there. We moved in 2 weeks before Superstorm Sandy came and we lost everything. And I was on the last 3 pages of issue 8 at the time. And so I had just got that in under the wire. Still had a studio in the city. So I went back there so I'd have a dry place to work and finish the last 3 pages. But that almost didn't get done, the last issue.
Wow. Yeah, that must be the other part of it, is the fact you might look at something that you worked on and all the memories of what it took to get that made has to come with it.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's funny because just last night I found an old copy of something I did back in 2009. It was X-Men Origins, The Beast. And I'm flipping through it and I'm like, oh, that's my ex-girlfriend, the people I use as models. Right, and I remember those photo sessions of getting these pictures of these people. And it was almost looking at a photo album of 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny because reading about other artists and seeing what they do and how they use models and stuff. It's always, I brought my dad in and he did this, and it's like whoever it is. And so that's really funny because it's a scrapbook. It's a way to look back and what's a time capsule of what happened at that moment.
Yeah, and even if it's not directly a model of somebody you know that's in the book, you'll just look at a panel and go, "Oh, I remember that day." Maybe it was a particularly stressful day because you had to have this page done by 5. And you were nowhere near, and you had to have TP it or something. You're remembering that, or something happened, but it's just like a smell or hearing a song or anything else that'll just trigger something. Yeah.
So again, the music was important, but also as important is, do you have a favorite snack food when you're working? Because I'm always curious about what people do, because it could change your dynamic, the way you feel.
Yeah. Lately, I'm trying to do better with what I eat. So I'm not snacking, but I'm a grazer, so I don't eat 2 or 3 big meals a day. I eat about 6, and it's just an excuse to get me out of the studio and get me moving. But
that makes sense.
Yeah, generally it's healthy food. I make myself some high protein stuff, so I'm on a high protein diet, animal protein, black beans, things like that. Boring food. If I could, I would just cookie dough ice cream all day. I'm trying not to do that.
Believe me, I just finished a giant, I think a 2-pound bag of baby carrots the other day, and I didn't notice it, and all of a sudden I'm like looking for the last one that's not there, and I'm going, what just happened? And I felt a little orange that day. Other than that, it was fine.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll if I get baby carrots and hummus, I get that out, and I'll just sit in front of the TV and I'll do the same thing. Like, where did it all go?
So now, have you seen a lot of the original Night Stalker, Kolchak, all that stuff?
Oh yeah, I'm a fan. So I saw the series. Yeah, I saw the original movie. When I got a chance to work on that, I was very excited. Every bit as excited as I was for the Star Trek Doctor Who, which I was fans of both too. What excited me was how many other Kolchak fans were out there, because it felt obscure, because it really was that one season, that one movie, or was there 2? But the thing is, it came and went, and if it was remembered as the inspiration for X-Files, and you're wondering, I don't know, there's no Kolchak conventions as far as I know.
There are
like that. I remember around the same time the Incredible Hulk was on, or shortly before, and I remember going, "Oh, Mr. McGee is Kolchak." If you think he's a monster hunter, nobody believes him. He's a reporter. I was like, I wonder if that's the inspiration that
makes perfect sense to me.
But we know for sure X-Files was inspired by it. What was particularly fun about Kolchak, though, was we were doing a 50th anniversary celebration, and like I said, it was an anthology, but everybody got a decade. And and the story that Peter and I were doing was set during the McCarthy trials, and there was appearances by, what's his name, Ed Murrows, CBS.
From the
and there was a lot of historical characters that I can't recall right now, but it was interesting to see Kolchak talking to a broadcast reporter, but nevertheless a reporter, and talking about the old days, and they went to college together, and he tied Kolchak into real history, which was a lot of fun.
Wow, that's really exciting. Edward R. Murrow. Yeah.
Yes.
There's something about, he was the classic television journalist. He was, It was really funny when you learn about his life. He had to take in a bunch of stuff that he didn't want to do. Remember him doing interviews with Liberace and other people, and they said, if you don't do those, you can't do the other ones.
Yeah. It's kind of like actors doing a Marvel movie so they can do their passion project.
So with all these different IPs and all the different types of work that come your way, is there a passion project that you haven't touched yet that you want to do, or is there something that you really would like to be able to say, ooh, that's the one that's got away, or someday?
There was one I always wanted to do. I wanted to do a sequel to Enemy Mine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, had this idea that what was the kid's name? Yamis?
Yummies.
Yeah. He grows up to be an ambassador as they're trying to work things out, and then something goes wrong and a war is about to break. And I thought it would be a great story of him as an adult.
Yeah.
So I actually pitched that a couple times, but getting the rights to that, and especially it being Disney, might be rough. I think there's something there. But mostly what I want to do right now is my own stuff. So I'm actually taking a risk. I saved up a little money so I could have the time to do it, and I'm putting out my own stuff. So I'm going to have 3 miniseries coming out in the next 3 years, and we'll see how that goes. I have a 5-year plan with regard to that. In the meantime, I'll still be doing Star Trek covers and probably short stories and things of that nature.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is this something, well, you said you have a 5-year plan, but this is going to happen over the next 3 years to start off with?
Yeah.
So when does that launch?
Let's see. San Diego Comic-Con, we're going to have a sneak preview issue of something called One Last Trick that I'm working on with a company called Midnight Factory, and Joseph Schmalke is the writer. So it's a shared property, and we're going to just do a small press run and see how that goes there. But it actually comes out in October, and it'll be part of a 4 or 5-part miniseries. And it's a good bridge for me because it's a sci-fi story. It's a sci-fi horror story.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I get to do all that sci-fi art that people are familiar with from me, but then it gets pretty horrific towards the end.
I think it's really cool because you get to do something that's unique to you, something that's brand new and something different. And I love the idea that you have this expanded plan of what you can roll out and how you can deliver it. Now, you're also playing it close to the vest because you always think, will anybody be interested?
Yeah.
Right? That's always the question. But
yeah, it's very much an experiment, and I'm very much aware of that. And which is the reason it took me 20 years to get to the point where I had the courage to do this, to be honest.
But the other side of it is the fact that when people see your body of work, the quality, the level of what you produce, I have to believe you have the fan base there, or at least you have enough of people that would have interest to say, ooh, I want to check this out because this is something new.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's why it's important. One of the reasons it's important to me to keep one foot in Star Trek by continually doing covers. That and because I can't let it go. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and it's a dream job. But I'm hoping that there's enough, that the Venn diagram, I'm not alone in that sci-fi horror middle ground there. And I don't think I am. There's aliens, predators. These are sci-fi horror, and they seem to be doing good. These properties have been around forever, so there is an audience there, and we'll see if I'm too weird or not weird enough, and we'll find out. But I am definitely doing some stuff that I have never done before.
That's really exciting. Congratulations, because I think that's going to be a lot of fun to see what you do and how that works out. I have to ask for people that draw, that have an idea of how to be creative, how to create their own stuff, and what's some advice that you can give people who just starting out? Like, what's the best things for them to do?
Apart from get your 10,000 hours, that's a given. Don't be afraid of hard work, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit more than a job, a little bit more even than a career. It has to be a little bit of an obsession, because it will take a lot of your time. And other than that, just get your stuff out there. Now, it's so easy now. Like, if you're speaking specifically comic book artists, there's so many ways you can get your stuff out there digitally. So there's no overhead. There's no printing costs. I would say when I started, I had to print stuff up and ship it out. I had to self-publish a book and make sure it's on every editor's desk, that kind of thing. But now you can do digital comics and promote on social media, and it's a lot easier. So just do it. Don't be afraid of it. And then again, it's hard work.
I think that is the reality of it. Is I think people do become a little bit afraid of putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really hard. I think one of the things that happens is so often that it's that first step. You have to put something out there, and say, even just showing it to other people, it's just sometimes so hard. Now, how did you find yourself, how did you find your way to be able to not just draw and create stuff, but then to really say, look, this is where I'm going. This is how I'm doing it. How hard was that for you?
It's a difficult process because there were a lot of portfolio reviews, and they hurt. Most of your portfolio reviews aren't going to be, oh, you're good, you got a job. Mostly they're going to give you advice, and you have to learn to love that. as much
Right.
as it hurts, as much as you don't want to hear it. What you want to hear is it's great. You want to, but when you get any criticisms, that's just going to make you better. So you have to fall in love with your failures, I guess is the best way to put it. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you're not going to get that anymore. And that's when you're going to get work. And I think what I did was I self-published first, like I said, and got something out there. And then at a convention, I met a writer that had a 12-page script, and he was publishing it in an anthology. So I worked for free and got it out there. And I never worked for free again after that. So make sure nothing's ever going to be perfect. The hardest thing for me was saying it's done. Whether you like it or not, it's done. That was the hardest thing to learn. I think that's a hurdle you have to get over. You have to learn to like criticism.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so hard, I mean, for writers, for artists, for anybody that's creating something, the last thing you want to hear is that's not the right thing, or that it didn't work, or whatever. And to walk away that feeling, actors get this a lot, rejection of an audition process, and to go in and saying, I'm perfect for this role. They're like, you're really not.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at the resilience and your ability to bounce back. And it's not easy for everybody.
No, it isn't. And it really doesn't get any easier. You just learn how to live with it. You got to figure 99% of what you're going to get is rejection.
Sure.
That's why it's very important to keep working. Get it. You can't have too much stuff out there because it's going to happen that way.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's that guy in high school that just seems like the ladies just love him. He's getting rejected 10 times before he gets the one date. That's how you have to think of this work. You have to do enough that you have to do 11 because 10 are going to get rejected. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's so evident that you not just are really good at what you do, but that you love what you do. It's like there's this thing when I was thumbing through the Harlan Ellison book, The City, and when I look at the imagery and I just look at that, I don't know, it fulfills the thing. Because I remember being at a con and getting the script, the original script out, and going, okay, this doesn't even feel like Star Trek. It's just a totally different animal.
Yeah.
And then later on to see this and to think, wow, I didn't have this imagery. I didn't have everything. But now when I think about the story itself, I have that imagery in my head.
Oh, cool.
It's really a neat thing. It's like,
and this is something that was stuck in his craw for a while. I think a lot of people wanted to see what it would have looked like if it was filmed. And that's what I kept in mind when I was doing the art. And it took a little bit of self-discipline because I wanted to do grand helicopter shots and I wanted to do the movie. And I had to try to rein it in and make it feel like an episode. There was one helicopter
I was just going to say, it is so episodic though. And the thing is, it feels that way. And the angles of which you look at the action, the activity, are angles you would choose if you were the cinematographer.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really, for one, it's very impressive. But for two, it's such a gift for somebody who enjoys it and that just wants to take it in as, I want this to be another living extension of Star Trek, that I wanted to be alive in my.
That's the advantage of me being a Star Trek fan.
Right.
Because I'm working on, I know exactly what we want. And so I tried to do that. I wanted City on Edge of Forever that I would buy, that I would be happy looking at. And that would be as close to having that episode done as possible.
I love the idea of Edith Keeler and Dr. McCoy and all the things that happened in the episode as it was filmed.
Sure.
But I really love seeing everything that happened that could have been in a total different reality. And there's something about being able to have both of that for a fan. What a gift that is.
We're of the same mind on that. I never saw it as a contest between the two versions. I enjoyed each for what they were. But I got to tell you, I was excited about painting Space Pirates, the USS Condor.
That is so cool. That is really neat. I think that's the whole thing when people start talking about Doctor Who or Star Wars or Star Trek or this. I'm like, no, why can't we do all? I do really enjoy a little bit of everything. There's not a piece. So I should ask you, since you did mention it a few times, who is your favorite Doctor?
I'm going to have to go with number 9.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What a shock. What a shock nowadays. It's funny. The resurgence of love for him is just amazing.
Oh, is there? I hadn't heard that. I usually get a spattering of applause when I'm on a panel and somebody asks me that question and I say that, but most people just look perplexed. But this was 15 years ago when I was doing the crossover. But Eccleston was always my favorite. He reminded me a lot of 4, who was my first Doctor.
Exactly.
And also maybe it was because we only got a year of him, so it left you wanting more. He came
Without
along so
question.
fast. Yeah.
I think over the last 2 years, I guess 2-3 years, he started doing Big Finish audiobooks, and he's doing other things that he's working. He actually just did an audiobook with Billy Piper.
Oh, cool.
And so one of the things is that he's at least dabbling in being part of that again, and not being, and he also started going to conventions again and doing all that. And I think there is a love for him that is, I think partly because we never saw more of it.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. And the same thing happened with Paul McGann. We had that thing where,
Yeah.
wait a second, that wasn't the best story, but what if he went further?
Yeah.
More. I've actually liked, there's so many of them. I grew up with Tom Baker, and it was the person that was Doctor Who to me.
Yeah.
And even though I loved the other ones, he was Doctor Who for the longest time.
When I was a kid,
almost-
he was the one and only one because I didn't know about the other doctors until later on. Like when
Much
I was
later,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
If you're in the U.S., you're watching it on PBS and
Yep.
at weird times and out of order. And then you're like, there's another Doctor? What's going on? Now, do you have any favorite films that you always go back to, that you rewatch? I always tell people that you can have a favorite film. It doesn't have to be the best film in the world, but if you're flipping through the channels, it comes on and it's 2 a.m. and you're tired, you want to go to bed, but it's partly on and you leave it on and you watch the rest of it.
Yeah. We already mentioned it, The Thing. But also anything Cronenberg, like if I'm flipping and I see Videodrome or Naked Lunch or something, I'm just like, I gotta.
There's such a broad delivery of like blending of genres, and whether it's a noir with the horror, with the science fiction, and then jumbling it all up and say, here, have fun with it.
Yeah.
And there's something really exciting about that. It's kind of like I was telling somebody earlier today that I remember being in Boston and sitting in a big theater, and there was 6 people in the theater, and then it was the first night of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
Oh.
And half the people left, and me and my wife sat there, and we were like, this is really good.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I love this. And I love the idea of people mixing the genres and putting things together that just don't necessarily fit.
Yeah.
What are you looking for from a convention?
The part I enjoy the most is connecting with other readers about what's happening. But generally the panels, I enjoy doing panels, especially with other professionals. Connecting with readers is great, but connecting with other professionals is great. It can be a pretty solitary lifestyle working in comics, especially now that most of us work out of our own studios and kind of FTP the pages. So it's almost like a class reunion, running into colleagues, asking them how they do it and getting ideas and exchanging ideas.
Sure.
What I usually do on the Star Trek cruise when I was working those that I really enjoyed was live painting. And so I already talked to them about that. Nothing's been locked down yet because it's a little bit ways away, but I'm definitely hoping I can do that because that's fun to do, because I'm not like Bob Ross. I'm not just talking about process. If I'm doing like, say, something, a Star Trek painting, then we will be talking about Star Trek as much as we're talking about the process. And that's great because you get a dialogue with people. And when it's over, I raffle off the painting. So somebody ends up with a free painting going home. So I'm hoping we can do something like that here at BayCon. I think we will be.
I think people will really enjoy that. I just think if you could just maybe just this once, maybe add one happy tree in there just for me. Anyway, because who doesn't like a happy tree?
Yeah.
Or a happy cloud. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Sure.
What I really love is the fact that the disciplines of writers and artists and performers and actors and all the different people that come to a convention.
Yeah.
And there's something amazing about us all being in the same room and immediately knowing that the next person next to you, we have something in common. We don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
But we have something in common.
Oh, and there's nothing like that hotel bar after the con too, because you bump into these people.
I believe during. But we will talk, sir. We will talk.
Yeah. Excellent. I'm excited for this. I can't wait.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take it easy.
Noted as one of Northern California's largest anime conventions, FanimeCon has returned to downtown San Jose on Memorial Day weekend with guests and events, exhibits and art shows, and of course, a vast array of incredible cosplay. Wocket Launch jetted over to the con to speak to a few of the attendees to learn more about some of their amazing cosplay creations.
This is one of my biggest productions I've ever done. I've been doing kind of closet cosplays for a long time, but this took about 3 hours this morning. Mostly the face makeup.
It took a month to figure out the cuffs alone. This was a lot of work. Yeah, it was definitely an experimental process. Her mom was absolutely indispensable costume director, figuring out how to do this stuff.
I came up with this idea like in February, March, but I was just working on and off, working on it between work and stuff. I would say about total was like 50 hours. Most of the effort came into the custom parts of this. This is a white sniper Nerf gun that I spray painted white, and then I 3D printed these heart-shaped barrel attachments to it.
So mostly is to taking photos and know new peoples. Also love Toho Fest. I just come back from the Toho gathering. It's very nice. About 20-30 cosplayers, and we make posts and take photos. It's a very awesome experience for me.
So I was kind of looking around. It's always hard to choose the next cosplay, especially anime conventions. Do I go anime? Do I go some video game? I wanted to go something that was really recognizable. It was easy to just walk around, and also easier to get stuff for it. Because it'd be hard to make leather pieces for some obscure character. So I chose Link. I could fit the body type for it.
I really love that feeling when someone recognizes the character and I get to, be in a picture with them, get to make their day. It's something they really love. They love this show, they love the movie or video game from the character they love, and they want a picture. And I think it's fun.
So this cosplay is a Cupid, but set in the modern day. It's from this manga called Love Bullet.
We are Ingo and Emmett, the subway bosses from Pokemon Black and White.
This is Rimu from Toho Project.
I am Link from Legend of Zelda, the Twilight Princess version.
This is Alistair from Hasbin Hotel.
Thanks again for watching this episode. And remember, never be cruel, never be cowardly. Always try to be nice, but never fail to be kind. I'm Sinohui, and until next time, be seeing you.